I invite you to explore my latest dramatic tale of military honor, betrayal, and righteous retribution on Purple Heart Stories. Trust me, it won't disappoint. And if you find yourself captivated, your support through likes and subscriptions means everything. The Crucible of Devotion. Chapter 1: The Envelope. 1. My name is Caleb Morgan. 34 winters have carved their story into my flesh. 12 of those years I surrendered to Navy SEALs Team 7, to things that remain buried in unmarked graves of memory. Isabel, my wife, 29, a dancer who makes gravity seem optional. She's the only tether keeping me from dissolving into the shadows of what I've done. But here's the problem. Photographs exist that shouldn't, and there are people who play chess with human souls. And my Isabel has become the queen on their board. The morning arrived with mathematical precision, 17 seconds before the alarm, as it had for the past decade and a half. My body knew time better than any Swiss mechanism, a reflex forged in places where oversleeping meant becoming food for flies, usually mine. Without opening my eyes, I catalogued Isabel's absence. The temperature gradient of cotton sheets, the acoustic signature of an empty house, everything whispered her departure. Gone at least an hour. Her rehearsals began when normal people still wrestled with dreams, and I'd grown accustomed to waking in a bed that remembered her warmth but not her presence. My right hand performed its ritual, sliding beneath the pillow to find the Sig Sauer P226, compact, reliable, a steel confessor that had heard more prayers than any priest. Isabel despised firearms in our sanctuary, but this was our détente. I kept no rifles in closets. She tolerated the pistol beneath down feathers. Muscle memory, finger indexed along the frame, divorced from the trigger. Safety discipline carved deeper than breathing. 5:30. The alarm finally found its voice, but I already stood barefoot on cold hardwood, calibrating myself for another rotation of the earth. Morning liturgy remained unchanged 6 days a week. 50 push-ups, 40 pull-ups on the door frame bar, 100 crunches. Cold shower, military standard, 3 minutes, no mercy. Isabel called it my compulsion. Kitchen, protein shake, 2 omega-3 capsules, black coffee without sugar, fuel for a machine I trained to survive on hatred and determination. Everything precise, clinical, scheduled. Plates and cups arranged by circumference, knives honed to surgical sharpness, stored blades aligned like soldiers at attention. Just discipline. Breakfasting, I scanned every corner of the kitchen for alterations. Some would label it paranoia. I called it occupational awareness. Paranoia sees threats in shadows. 12 years in the teams taught me. Threats exist everywhere, they just don't always advertise. The phone shattered the house's monastery silence. Unknown number, 7 digits following the area code. I lifted the receiver, offering nothing. Caleb, Isabel's voice carried tension like a taut wire. I forgot my phone at home. Think I left it on the nightstand. Could you check? Of course, my voice remained level, though something clicked internally. Isabel never forgot her phone. 3 years of marriage, not once. Thanks, love. I need to dash to a meeting, I'll call later. The line died before I could ask whose number she was borrowing. 2. The bedroom greeted me with her signature scent, subtle fusion of jasmine and amber. The phone lay exactly where she'd indicated, on the nightstand beside her tower of books. My wife devoured literature, Murakami, Morrison, DeLillo. An intellectual, my complete antithesis with my technical manuals and combat memoirs. I retrieved the phone, and my hand disturbed the book stack. They tumbled like dominoes, and from between the pages of Norwegian Wood, a cream envelope escaped. No postage, no address, sealed with expensive paper wax bearing the initials DP. Dionysus Performance, the dance company she'd recently joined. I knew I shouldn't breach this boundary. Personal space, one of our marriage's unwritten constitutions. But combat experience taught me, Sometimes rules must break to ensure survival. My fingers mapped the contents without opening. Thick paper, multiple sheets, possibly photographs. My heart struck heavier. One sharp motion and I violated the seal. Inside lay glossy prints, professional high-resolution, studio lighting, and in each Isabel naked, with a man I'd never seen. First frame, her pressed against a wall, head thrown back, eyes shut in ecstasy. Second, on her knees before the stranger, his hand tangled in her hair. Third, them on a bed, her body arched beneath him. Every detail, every curve, every freckle, all painfully familiar, and all happening with someone else. Between the photographs, a note, calligraphic script clearly not Isabel's. The Heathman Hotel, room 714, tomorrow 9:00 p.m. Don't be late. I lowered myself onto the bed, still clutching the images. Red curtains descended over my vision. Air in my lungs felt like concrete. The roar in my ears crescendoed like a grenade's prelude. Reason wrestled with instinct. Instinct screamed, "Find the bastard, gouge his eyes, snap every bone." But reason, that cold operator's logic that had preserved my life countless times, whispered, "Analyze, observe, gather intelligence." 3. I felt two forces colliding within: rage, ancient as murder, demanding blood, and glacial calculation of an operator who knows emotions kill faster than bullets. I couldn't believe it. Not Isabel. Not the woman who held me through night terrors when I woke screaming, still tasting Kandahar's dust, still hearing my brother's death rattles. But photographs don't lie. They were real as the pistol under my pillow, as the scars mapping my body. I remembered our first encounter, a veterans' charity gala. I attended from duty to fallen comrades. She came as a featured performer. Isabel danced to Langston Hughes' war poems, and her movement pierced the armor I'd spent years constructing. My eyes swept the room, marking exits, identifying threats, everything except her. After her performance, I stood at the bar, bourbon my only warm spot in a frozen world. She approached unbidden. "Hard coming back, isn't it?" she asked, meeting my gaze with unsettling directness. "You don't know anything about it," I replied. "My brother didn't return from Fallujah," she said quietly, "so maybe I know more than you think." 3 months later we married. Small ceremony, only essential witnesses. She wore a simple white dress, I wore a suit that constricted my shoulders. We vowed eternal fidelity, and I believed every syllable. I returned the photographs to the envelope and closed my eyes. Breathing, control, focus. Direct confrontation would be simplest. Show the images, demand explanations, demolish everything with one strike. But I was trained differently. Gather intelligence, assess the situation, develop strategy. I wouldn't act blind like a civilian. I'd discover what was happening before drawing conclusions. I carefully resealed the envelope and replaced it between the book's pages. Isabel's phone remained on the nightstand. Let her think I never found it. Instead of calling her, I began preparing for surveillance. 4. Surveillance is the art of becoming nothing, being everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, seeing all while remaining invisible. I dressed in forgettable clothing, gray slacks, navy shirt, cap with extended bill obscuring features. Everything logo-free, patternless, nothing that would register in a witness's memory. In my pocket, a folding knife with titanium blade, not for assault, for nerve steadying. I always thought clearer when I felt steel nearby. Isabel frequented Dionysus offices lately. I knew her schedule. Today she'd work until 6. A taxi delivered me to a coffee shop across from the arts complex housing the dance company. Perfect observation position. Through glass walls, I could monitor all building entrances and exits. I ordered an Americano and positioned myself by the window, opening a tablet with an e-book. Typical office drone on break. Invisible. 3 hours I remained motionless, like a sniper on overwatch. Eyes registered every person entering and leaving, brain automatically classified threat levels. Nobody noticed me. At 2:37 p.m. I spotted her. Isabel exited the building accompanied by a tall man in an expensive suit. They conversed animatedly but not intimately. Professional distance. He said something, she laughed. That specific laugh I knew by heart. They parted. The man entered a black Mercedes. Isabel walked along the street. I waited 30 seconds, then followed, maintaining optimal distance, close enough to track, far enough to avoid detection. She entered a cafe, stayed 20 minutes, lunch, judging by the establishment's branded bag she carried out. Then headed back toward the office but didn't enter, instead stopping at the entrance, clearly expecting someone. 10 minutes later, a taxi arrived for her. I was ready. My taxi waited around the corner. Driver already paid double to follow the indicated vehicle. Isabel's taxi headed downtown. Heavy traffic, but my driver maintained visual contact. Finally, the car stopped at a modern glass building with Dionysus Performance on the facade. Not the main office, a satellite location or perhaps a studio. Isabel exited the taxi and strode purposefully toward the entrance. I ordered my driver to stop half a block away. Something didn't compute. Why travel to another office of the same company? 5. The building lacked public access. Security, turnstiles, badge scanning system. But I had connections. One call and I was speaking with Mike Donovan, former special ops, now working for a major security firm. We'd survived selection together at Camp McCall, pulled each other from sand pits under scorching sun. Such bonds don't corrode. Caleb, you good? Mike's voice carried caution. I rarely use this number. Need access to a building surveillance system. Don't ask why, I said, watching the Dionysus entrance. Pause. Address. I recited it. Give me 10 minutes, he said and disconnected. Exactly 9 minutes and 40 seconds later, my phone pinged. Message with temporary login and password for the video surveillance system. I returned to the taxi and opened the secure app on my phone. The screen split into 6 sections showing the building's main areas: lobby, corridors, conference rooms. And there she was, Isabel. Conference room on the 3rd floor. She sat at a long table with a group of people. Center of attention, a silver-haired man with a professor's bearing, likely the choreographer. Beside him, a polished type with penetrating eyes, clearly a producer. Several others, technical staff by their appearance. I cycled through cameras, seeking better angles. The corner camera in the conference room provided ideal coverage. The silver-haired man stood and began speaking, pointing at a screen behind him. No audio, but his gestures suggested he was discussing some project. Then he lifted a file folder and opened it. From the folder he extracted photographs, the same photographs I'd found in the envelope. He spread them on the table, periodically pointing to different details. A meeting, not a rendezvous. Work process, not infidelity. I felt something loosen in my chest. The knot that had been tightening since I saw the images began slowly unwinding. The choreographer collected the photographs and handed them to an assistant. Now he looked directly at Isabel, speaking with an expression of genuine admiration. I switched to another camera showing her face in close-up, smiling, not performative, genuine, happy. She nodded, then stood and shook the choreographer's hand. The others present applauded. This wasn't betrayal. These were audition materials, staged photographs for a role. For the first time that day, I felt I could breathe normally. 6. Isabel continued smiling, accepting congratulations from everyone present. The choreographer embraced her paternally, without a hint of anything more. The producer shook hands formally but with clear satisfaction. Obviously, they'd given her the role. I exhaled, feeling clarity return to my mind. Of course, Isabel would never. What an idiot. I continued observing the meeting. Everything made sense now. The photographs were part of auditions for an erotic dance piece. Staged scenes. Professional work. Isabel a professional dancer. Of course her career would include such roles. I should have trusted her. Doubts, suspicions, all were insults to our marriage. I was about to disconnect when I noticed something strange. The choreographer's assistant, a young woman in glasses, said something, leaning toward Isabel. From my wife's expression, I could tell the news shocked her. She covered her mouth, eyes widening. I immediately switched to another camera that might capture the assistant's face, hopping to read her lips. Lucia Garcia, accident during performance, tragically died. The assistant continued speaking, but turned away, and I lost the ability to lip read. Isabel looked pale, shaken. She asked the choreographer something, and he nodded with a serious expression. But what truly alarmed me, a fleeting smirk on the producer's face, standing slightly behind. He exchanged glances with a man in the corner I hadn't noticed before. The man nodded almost imperceptibly. Something was wrong here. Isabel got the role, but under what circumstances? Who was Lucia Garcia? How was she connected to this role? What accident? I disconnected from the surveillance system and sent Mike a message of thanks, then asked the taxi driver to take me home. Conflicting emotions overwhelmed me. Relief, Isabel hadn't betrayed me. Shame, I hadn't trusted her, stalked her like a suspect. And a new, anxious feeling that wouldn't subside. Something about this dance company was wrong. Something about this role was dangerous. I remembered the producer's strange smile at the mention of the dancer's death. Not grief, not regret, satisfaction, as if a plan had worked exactly as intended. I decided not to confront Isabel about what I'd seen. Not now. First, I needed more information to understand what we were dealing with. The sense of danger I'd learned to recognize in hot zones had never failed me, and now it was screaming. When the taxi pulled up to the house, I already knew. I'd need to use every skill acquired in 12 years of special operations, but not to fight terrorists or drug cartels. This time to protect my own wife. The Crucible of Devotion. Chapter 2, Investigation. 1. I sat in the darkened living room when the key turned in the front door lock. 7:43 p.m. Isabel returned 27 minutes later than usual, not a critical delay, but enough to notice. "Caleb, you home?" Her voice carried different notes, elevated, with that particular vibrating quality that emerged when she struggled to contain joy. I clicked the table lamp switch, watching her flinch at the unexpected illumination. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you," I said, rising from the chair. "Saving electricity." Isabel laughed, genuine, like wind chimes. My Isabel, not the woman from the photographs. You, always sitting in darkness like some secret agent on assignment. If she only knew how close to truth. She kicked off her shoes, expensive but practical, low heels, and flew to me, wrapping arms around my neck. She smelled of floral perfume, coffee, and the barely detectable scent of rosin. Professional scent. "I have amazing news," she burst out, gazing at me with radiant eyes. "Remember that project with Dionysus I mentioned? Eugene Marchant's new piece." "Final breath," I clarified, maintaining neutral expression. "Yes," she nodded, apparently not noticing I knew the title though she'd never mentioned it. "They gave me the lead role. Can you imagine, the lead? In Eugene Marchant's work." I feigned surprise, raised eyebrows, widened eyes. You learn such things interrogating prisoners who mustn't realize you already know their secrets. "Congratulations, love, that's incredible." I genuinely felt happy for her. Isabel pursued her career with the same dedication I'd once brought to mission preparation. A role with a renowned choreographer, her personal Kandahar, only without gunfire and blood. So far without blood. Isabel bustled in the kitchen, retrieving from the refrigerator the champagne bottle she kept for special occasions, and recounted the selection process, how the choreographer personally chose her among dozens of candidates. I listened, nodded, asked appropriate questions, but part of my consciousness continued analyzing the situation. She didn't mention the nature of the role, said nothing about erotic scenes, about photographs, not a word. We opened champagne, clinked glasses, and I finally asked the question a normal, unsuspecting husband should ask. What's the piece about? What's the story? Isabel looked away, taking a large sip from her glass, clear sign of nervousness I recognized from hundreds of interrogations. It's a psychological dance theater piece with elements of, she paused, choosing words, erotic drama. So there'll be explicit scenes, I stated evenly. She exhaled, as if bracing for impact. Yes, quite explicit, but it's integral to the narrative, not mere exploitation, you understand. The protagonist uses her sensuality as a weapon, too. Isabel, I interrupted gently, you're a dancer. I knew who I was marrying. Her shoulders relaxed, as if a heavy burden lifted. I was so afraid you'd be jealous, she confessed. You can be so possessive. I smiled, trying to make it look natural. I'm possessive about your safety, not your talent. She kissed me, long, deep, with gratitude. I responded, trying not to think about those photographs, not to imagine her with another man. Professional work, I reminded myself. Just work. That night we made love as usual, tenderly, passionately, without extended foreplay. Isabel was never one for bedroom experiments. Another reason why the photograph seemed so wrong, so alien. After, when she fell asleep, curled up with her back pressed against my chest, I stared into darkness, replaying the day's events in my mind. Lucia Garcia, accident during performance, tragically died. Something told me this was only the beginning. 2. A month flew by like a single day. Isabel was completely immersed in rehearsals, often returning after midnight, barely standing from exhaustion. We saw each other less frequently, but that was normal. A dancer's work rarely aligned with standard business hours. I wasn't idle. After discharge from the Navy, I'd founded a small security firm, safety consultations for private individuals and companies. Business wasn't booming as I'd hoped, but it was steady. Former military personnel are valued in this field. That morning I woke as usual, 17 seconds before the alarm. Isabel wasn't beside me. She'd stayed overnight at a hotel near the studio. Rehearsals ran past midnight, and the choreographer insisted the dancers rest before the next grueling day. At least that's how she explained it. I completed my morning routine and went for the mail. Usually Isabel handled this. She enjoyed receiving paper letters, advertising flyers, magazines. Small pleasures of normal life she'd been denied in childhood, constantly relocating with diplomat parents. Among the ads and bills lay a cream envelope. No stamp, no postmark. Someone had placed it in the box personally. My heart skipped. I knew this envelope, knew this thick, expensive paper. I returned inside, locked the door, and activated the security system. Only then did I carefully open the envelope. Inside were more photographs, but this time they weren't staged. The images showed Isabel and a man, not the one from the first photographs, in a hotel room. Standard suite judging by the furnishings. First frame, they enter the room, his hand on her waist. Second, sitting on the bed's edge talking. Her posture spoke of tension, shoulders raised, back straight. Third, he pours wine into 2 glasses. Fourth, his hand on her thigh. Fifth, her in underwear, his hand in her hair. Sixth, naked bodies on the bed. The shots were taken by a hidden camera, installed somewhere near the ceiling. Grainy but clear enough to identify faces. The photographs came with a note, printed on a printer. She doesn't deserve this role. Copies already sent to tabloids. You have 24 hours. I stared at the images, and time slowed as it does before a shot. My brain worked with cold efficiency, analyzing information. First, these weren't scenes from the dance piece. Too intimate, too real. Second, Isabel looked tense, not passionate. This didn't resemble betrayal from love or desire. Third, shots taken professionally from perfect angle, someone prepared in advance. Fourth, the note said she doesn't deserve the role. Not your wife is cheating, but specifically about the role. I carefully returned the photographs to the envelope. Hands didn't shake, training and experience, but inside everything boiled. Show Isabel? No. She'd deny, explain, and I wouldn't learn the truth. Besides, if she was really in danger, better not reveal that I knew. Let her think her secret was safe. I placed the envelope in the safe behind the painting in my office, old-fashioned but reliable. Isabel never entered there without me. Then I took out my phone and dialed. Mike, it's me again. Need another favor. 3. Lucia Garcia, 28 years old, rising dancer with an impressive resume. Born in Barcelona, studied at the London School of Contemporary Dance, performed in several independent productions. Cast in the lead role of Eugene Marchant's Final Breath. Tragically died 3 months ago during rehearsal of a scene on a high-rise parking structure. Fell from the 5th floor due to faulty safety equipment. All this information was publicly available: obituaries, articles in professional journals, colleagues' condolences on social media. Standard Hollywood tragedy, young star whose life ended at its peak. But I dug deeper. Mike provided access to police reports, former military have their channels in law enforcement. Official conclusion: accident. Case closed. Too quickly closed, too clean. I began searching for information about other accidents connected to Dionysus. This took time. Not everything was digitized, not everything publicly accessible. But I was patient. In the SEALs, they taught us, real investigation isn't a Hollywood chase with gunfire but long, methodical work. And here's what I discovered. Alina Kurtz, 25 years old, drowned during filming of an underwater scene for Deep Fear 2 years ago. Breathing apparatus suddenly failed. Miriam Jones, 30 years old, died in a fire on the set of Death Game 18 months ago. Special effects went out of control. Angela Lee, 27 years old, crashed on a motorcycle during a stunt for Final Rush a year ago. Brakes failed. Natasha Petrova, 29 years old, died from anaphylactic shock after allergen was added to her makeup, one even she didn't know about. 9 months ago, performance Red Mist. And now Lucia Garcia. 5 cases, 5 beautiful, talented women, 5 accidents during performances by the same company. Too many for coincidence, too few for statistics, perfect number for a pattern. All deceased dancers were roughly the same age, same type, dark-haired, fair-skinned with expressive eyes. All were at career peaks, all had received roles dozens of others coveted. Isabel fit this profile perfectly. I closed the laptop and shut my eyes, trying to assemble the puzzle. What connected these deaths? Why didn't police notice the pattern? Or did they notice but chose not to investigate? I needed additional information, and for that, I required access to places where I wasn't invited. 4. Night, the best time for infiltration. The human brain is least active between 2 and 4 a.m., even for trained guards. Fatigue can't be completely conquered, only temporarily postponed. The skyscraper housing Dionysus's main office was lit like a Christmas tree, typical practice for corporate buildings. Creates illusion of security, but actually only helps intruders. In absolute darkness, it's harder to determine what's normal and what's deviation. I left my car 5 blocks away in an underground mall parking structure. Clothing, black tactical pants with multiple pockets, dark turtleneck, light boots with soft soles. In the backpack, tools I'd never purchased officially. Building security, too, at the entrance, 2 more patrolling floors. Standard surveillance cameras, magnetic door locks, badge scanners. Serious for a typical business center, but not for someone who'd infiltrated fortified bases in Afghanistan. I'd observed the building for 3 days, studying staff shift patterns, patrol routes, camera placements. Mike provided the engineering schematics. Don't ask where he got them. I entered through the service door used by janitors. Electronic lock yielded in 30 seconds. Some skills aren't forgotten. Producer Richard Klein's office was on the 24th floor. I climbed the service stairs, slowly, silently, stopping at each landing to scan the environment. On the 24th floor, I froze behind the door, scanning the corridor with a portable thermal imager. Empty. Surveillance cameras pointed at elevators and main corridor, typical security design flaw. People think about primary routes and forget the periphery. Klein's office was a corner room with panoramic windows, luxury and status display. The door lock was more complex, biometric scanner and card reader. I retrieved a device from my backpack, resembling a smartphone but heavier. Military development that should never have left the combat zone. Small EMP generator capable of temporarily disabling electronics within half-meter radius. The lock clicked, the indicator went dark, I quickly slipped inside. The office was impressive. Antique furniture, paintings clearly originals, glass desk the size of half my living room, and not a single computer. Strange. In our age, even the most conservative executives use digital technology. I began methodically searching the premises, avoiding the central area that might have motion sensors. First the cabinets along the walls, business papers, contracts, nothing unusual. Then desks, drawers, standard office supplies. And then I noticed a small inconsistency in the parquet pattern near the far wall. Barely visible, but for someone trained to find hidden hatches and caches in the Tora Bora Mountains, obvious as daylight. Pressing a specific section of wall, I was rewarded with a quiet click. Part of the wall slid aside, revealing a small room. Inside stood a solitary computer on a metal table. No decorations, no luxury, pure functionality. I powered on the computer. Standard security system, password, two-factor authentication. Nothing complex for the device I extracted from my backpack. Small gray box with USB connector, designed for hacking Iranian servers. 4 minutes later, I was inside the system. Files were organized with military precision, each project in separate folder, subfolders by years, months, production stages. I opened the Final Breath folder and began reviewing documents. Budget, shooting schedule, contracts with dancers, nothing unusual. But one folder caught my attention, stakes. It was protected by additional password which proved harder to crack, but I was persistent. What I saw made me freeze with ice in my veins. Tables, graphs, lists of names, sums with 6 and 7 zeros, scans of bank transfers. This was a betting pool, real, organized with clear structure, but bets weren't placed on horses or sports teams. Bets were placed on dancers' lives. Lot 734, Lucia Garcia, survival scene 47 fall from height, current odds 15-1 against survival. Lot 735, Miriam Jones, survival scene 29 building fire, current odds 8-1 against survival. And so on for each deceased dancer. I opened the most recent document and saw Isabel's name. Lot 738, Isabel Morgan, survival scene 34 underwater sequence, current odds 5-1 against survival. Note in red, high stakes, VIP clients interested in outcome. I felt nauseous, not from fear but from pure, undiluted rage. They used death as entertainment, as gambling, and my wife was the next chip in their casino. I continued searching and found a folder labeled Insurance. Inside, photographs of dancers with men in compromising situations, including those same images of Isabel I'd received this morning. A text document nearby explained the scheme. Photographs were used as guarantee that the dancer wouldn't refuse the dangerous scene. If she refused, images go to tabloids, career destroyed, reputation annihilated, especially for married women. Perfect trap. I inserted a flash drive and began copying files. Not everything, only the most important. Documentation on bets, photographs, bank transfers. Suddenly I heard voices in the corridor. Guards, not on schedule. Something had spooked them. I quickly finished copying, closed all files, and shut down the computer. The secret room closed with the same quiet click it had opened with. Now I needed to escape, and quickly. 5. Voices approached. Two people, heavy footsteps, purposeful, not routine patrol, they were searching for someone. I surveyed options. Windows sealed tight, shatterproof glass. Door, the only exit, but that's where the guards would enter. Ventilation too small for an adult. Only improvisation remained. I quickly moved to the ceiling, using decorative columns along walls as support. Old trick from mountain operations. Nobody ever looks up. The door opened. Two entered, men in black suits with professional bearing and wary eyes. Not typical shopping center guards. Former military, possibly even special services. "Clear here," said one, surveying the office. "Sensors showed movement 5 minutes ago," replied the other, hand on the holster under his jacket. "Check the vault." They knew about the secret room, so they were part of the system, not mere hired hands. The first guard approached the wall and activated the mechanism. The room opened. "Computer was accessed," he said tensely. "Someone was here." "Check access logs," commanded the second, drawing his pistol. "I'll sweep the office." He began methodically checking the premises, moving from door to windows, from desk to cabinets. Eventually he'd look up and see me. I assessed the situation. 2 against 1, they're armed, know the terrain, connected to remaining security. I have element of surprise and close combat skills. Uneven odds, but no other options. When the second guard passed directly beneath me, I made my move. Jump, palm strike to the chin. Simultaneously, the other hand intercepts the wrist with the pistol. The guard didn't even manage to cry out. The blow disrupted nerve endings, temporarily depriving him of voice and coordination. The pistol fell from his hand, but didn't reach the floor. I caught it midair. The first guard burst from the secret room, saw his partner collapsing to the floor, and me with the weapon. His hand jerked toward his holster, but was a fraction of a second too late. "Don't move," I said quietly, aiming the pistol at his center mass. "Hands where I can see them." He froze, slowly raising his hands. His eyes showed surprise, not fear but surprise. He clearly hadn't expected to encounter a professional. "Who are you?" he asked. "What do you want?" "The truth about Final Breath," I answered. "About the stakes, about the deaths." His face changed, surprise replaced by something resembling relief. "You're Isabel Morgan's husband," he said. Not a question, a statement. I didn't answer, but inside everything tightened. They knew who I was. "Listen," continued the guard, "this isn't what you think, we're not." He didn't finish. The office door burst open, and 4 more in identical uniforms rushed in. I realized the first 2 were just buying time, waiting for reinforcements. I managed to fire twice, shoulder shot to one, leg to another, not lethal but enough to disable. Then something hit me from behind, taser, judging by sensations. Muscles seized with convulsion, pistol fell from numb fingers. Before losing consciousness, I saw another person enter the office. Tall, elegant, with perfect posture and the gaze of someone examining an interesting specimen under a microscope. "So this is him," I heard his voice before darkness swallowed consciousness. "Interesting, very interesting." Six. I came to with a jerk as trained. No groans, no movements, no change in breathing. First, assess the situation without revealing consciousness. Smells, dust, metal, equipment, lubricant. Sounds, muffled voices somewhere nearby, ventilation, hum, distant traffic noise. Body position, sitting in a chair, hands behind back, handcuffs, legs also cuffed to chair legs. I cracked my eyes, just enough to see through lashes. Large space, studio or warehouse converted to performance venue. Soft boxes, cameras, lighting equipment. In the center, deep pool with transparent walls filled with water. Above it, metal construction with platforms at different heights. I was cuffed to a chair in the corner, partially hidden behind lighting equipment. From here, the entire studio was visible, but I wasn't visible from the central platform. By the pool stood a group of people, young assistant with tablet, elderly man with underwater filming equipment, several technicians, and Isabel. She stood at the pool's edge in a leotard, apparently preparing for a scene. Looked focused but not frightened. She didn't know what was really happening. "He's awake," said a voice to my right. I turned my head. Beside me stood that same elegant man I'd seen last before losing consciousness. About 60, impeccably dressed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to power. Eyes cold, studying, like an entomologist examining a particularly interesting insect. "Mr. Morgan," he said with a slight accent I couldn't quite identify, "allow me to introduce myself. I'm called the Investor." I remained silent. In captivity situations, the best tactic is to give the opponent no information, not even something as insignificant as acknowledging you hear them. "No need to pretend," continued the Investor. "We know who you are, know about your service, about your skills. Impressive service record, I must say." He paused, studying my reaction. Getting no response, he smiled slightly. "You discovered our little project. Impressive achievement. Most people couldn't even suspect its existence." I still said nothing, but inside everything boiled. This man spoke of dancers' lives and deaths as a project. "Look," he pointed to the pool. "Now your wife will rehearse scene 34, underwater pursuit. Very complex stunt. Requires special preparation, endurance, ability to hold breath for extended periods." Isabel put on a wetsuit handed to her by an assistant. Technicians checked equipment. "Of course, for normal filming, body doubles and underwater stunt specialists are used," continued the Investor. "But our clients prefer authenticity, real risk, real emotions." I couldn't hold back. "You're a fucking Fight Club organizer, only instead of fighters you use dancers," I hissed through clenched teeth. The Investor laughed, quiet, restrained laugh of someone unaccustomed to expressing emotions openly. "Oh no, Mr. Morgan, you don't understand the most interesting part. We don't bet on dancers. We bet on people who love these dancers, on how far they're willing to go for salvation." He leaned closer. "5 dead dancers, tragic of course, but they were just bait. The real game began later, when fathers, brothers, husbands tried to take revenge. When they infiltrated our offices, hacked our systems, stalked our personnel. When they, like you now, found themselves here, ready for anything to save their loved ones." I felt my blood run cold. This wasn't simple sadism. This was something more perverse, more complex. "What exactly do you want?" I asked, trying to remain calm. "From you," the Investor smiled. "Participation in our game. You see, right now Isabel is preparing for a very dangerous scene. The equipment, let's say, not entirely reliable. Probability of accident high." He paused. "But we have another option. You, with your experience and skills, could replace the stunt performer in several scenes. Scenes with real-life risk. If you complete all the trials, we'll release your wife. If not, well, she'll still perform her underwater scene, with the same chances of success." "Why should I believe you?" I asked. "Because you have no choice. the investor answered simply. And because the game is more interesting when players believe in the possibility of victory. He nodded to someone behind me. The handcuffs clicked, freeing my hands and feet. Decide, Mr. Morgan. Your wife's time is running out. I looked at the pool. Isabel already stood at the edge, preparing to dive. A technician handed her an air tank small, clearly with limited supply. Fine, I said, I agree. The investor smiled, not joyfully, but with the cold satisfaction of a chess player who'd cornered his opponent. Excellent, let the game begin. The Crucible of Devotion. Chapter 3, Trial. 1. The world compressed to a single point, Isabel's face by the pool. She was focused, professional. Didn't suspect that at this moment her fate was being decided. The investor lightly drummed his fingers on the armrest, observing my reaction. Polite, reserved, with the face of a surgeon discussing a complex operation. Nothing personal, just business. I dealt with different types of sadists, religious fanatics in Afghan mountains, field commanders with delusions of grandeur, drug barons who turned cruelty into art. But there was always some primitiveness in their sadism, animal thirst for others' pain, assertion of superiority through humiliation. The investor came from another world, an intellectual sadist for whom human tragedies were material for study, almost scientific. Such are the most dangerous. You must understand the scope of our project, he continued while I sat in the chair, calculating attack options. This isn't just gambling, it's research into human nature under extreme conditions. He signaled, and one of the guards handed him a tablet. You see, Mr. Morgan, we've created a unique system. Dancers attract attention, create dramatic stories, but the real stars are their defenders. Brothers, fathers, husbands, those willing to do anything to save loved ones. He turned the tablet screen toward me. On it was a list of names, beside each, a photograph and numbers. Nicholas Petrov, Natasha's brother, former GRU Special Forces, passed 3 trials, failed on the 4th, fall from height. Success probability was 28%, he exceeded expectations. He scrolled the page. Marcus Lee, Angela's husband, former Marine, 4 trials, died on the 5th, no rules fight with a professional fighter. Success probability 15%, amazing endurance. I felt sick from the cold, statistical approach to human lives. Game isn't the right word, said the investor, as if reading my thoughts. This is evolution of entertainment, our clients people tired of everything. Billionaires who have nothing left to desire, nothing to fear. They seek genuine emotions. The stake in our game isn't money, but real life, real devotion. They pay millions to see how far a person can go for love. And what's stopping me from breaking your neck right now? I asked in a flat voice. 4 guards with weapons behind your back, smiled the investor. And the fact that if your attempt fails, your wife will immediately become victim of an accident. See the man at the pool control panel. 1 button press, and the air supply system in her scuba tank fails. I looked in the indicated direction. The technician at the controls met my gaze and nodded almost imperceptibly. But the main thing, continued the investor, we're offering you a chance. You pass our trials, we release your wife. No pursuit, no threats. You'll be the first to complete the entire program. That's valuable for our clients. And if I refuse? Then we return to the original plan, shrugged the investor. Isabel performs her dangerous stunt, with real, not staged life risk. And who knows, maybe she'll survive. Chances are about 1 in 5. I looked at my wife. She smiled, listening to something the choreographer was saying, trusting, not suspecting that the entire performance troupe was participating in a perverse spectacle. There was no choice, never had been. All right, I said, I agree. Excellent, nodded the investor, as if I just accepted his real estate deal proposal. You'll have 5 trials, 5 chances to prove your devotion. He stood, adjusting his impeccable jacket. "Prepare him for the first trial," he told the guards. "We begin in an hour." 2. They gave me clothes, simple, functional, made of fire-resistant fabric. Black pants, gray t-shirt, light boots with thin soles. I changed in a small dressing room, noting all potential exits, surveillance cameras, possible improvised weapons. The guards watched me with professional vigilance, didn't approach too close, kept hands near holsters, maintained distance from each other so I couldn't neutralize them with one movement. Professionals, as I'd thought. But they didn't have what I had, absolute readiness to die. That always gives an advantage. They led me to the main performance area. What had been a studio now looked like an ancient Roman arena. In the center, open space surrounded by lighting equipment. Above them, darkened boxes where silhouettes of people were dimly visible. Isabel sat in a chair marked dancer on the back, some distance from the arena. Beside her, assistants, makeup artists, other crew members. She waved at me, clearly surprised by my presence. "Your husband agreed to help us with some scenes." I heard the choreographer's voice explaining the situation to her. "He has military experience, perfect for these stunts." Isabel frowned, not frightened but puzzled. I tried to smile at her to avoid suspicion. In the center of the platform, I saw the structure that defined the first trial. A wall about 3 meters high in front of it, a shallow ditch filled with some liquid. Technical specialists bustled around, checking equipment. The investor appeared from backstage, now dressed in an impeccable tuxedo, as if for an opera premiere. "Welcome to our modest arena, Mr. Morgan," he said, approaching me. "Allow me to explain the rules of the first trial." He pointed to the wall. A classic of stunt art, jumping through a wall of fire. The simplest trial of all that await you. You run, jump over the ditch with combustible mixture, clear the wall, and land on a mat on the other side. "Sounds simple," I noted. "Oh, certainly," smiled the investor. "For a professional stuntman, but there are nuances. First, the combustible mixture isn't prop but real, flame temperature, about 800 degrees Celsius. Second, the fireproof suit usually used by stuntmen has been replaced with ordinary fire-resistant fabric, protects but not completely. Third, the wall is coated with a special compound that ignites on contact with flame." He paused, observing my reaction. "In short, you'll be jumping practically unprotected through real fire that will engulf you in midair. Your skills and speed determine how severe the burns you receive. 80 to 90% of stuntmen would refuse such a stunt. And if I refuse, then your wife immediately begins her underwater stunt, with those same chances I mentioned." I nodded. There was still no choice. The investor moved to a small platform, overlooking the entire hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," he addressed the darkened boxes, "our first participant is ready to begin the performance. Please place your bets." I heard muffled movement in the boxes, whispers, rustling clothes, quiet clinking of champagne glasses, like in a theater before the show begins. Only the stake in this performance was my life. The choreographer, a silver-haired man with a professor's appearance, approached me with a professional smile. "To make everything look authentic for filming," he said, pointing to the cameras. I understood. He was part of this spectacle. Perhaps didn't know all the details, but definitely wasn't an innocent victim. Technicians ignited the liquid in the ditch. Flames shot up, hungry, orange-blue, real. Heat hit my face even from several meters away. I moved to the starting position, took a deep breath, concentrated. Analyzed the task. Sufficient run-up to clear the ditch. Strong push to jump as high as possible over the fire. Minimal contact with the wall surface. Group on landing, roll to dissipate inertia and extinguish possible clothing ignition. Another breath, exhale. Run, 4, 5, 6 steps, acceleration. Push strong with full commitment. Flight over the ditch fires heat like a blow to the skin. Hands behind head protecting neck, the most vulnerable spot. Contact with wall and it ignites as the investor promised. Flames engulf clothes, hair, burn skin. Flight over the wall top. Fall, group, roll, patting body, extinguishing flames. Everything happens in seconds, but each moment stretches as if in slow motion. I feel pain, sharp, wild, but familiar. Pain is an old friend for those who have undergone special training. It can be accepted, categorized, set aside for later examination. I rise to my feet, t-shirt burned on back and sleeves, skin on forearms and neck red, blisters in places, first and second degree burns, painful but tolerable, not fatal. The investor descends to the arena, applauding, slowly calculated, maintaining a polite smile. Bravo, Mr. Morgan, you exceeded expectations. Most experts bet you'd receive at least 40% body burns, and you have. He assessed me appraisingly. No more than 15%. Impressive result. What's next? I ask, ignoring the pain. Oh, let's not rush, smiles the investor. A doctor will examine your burns, provide first aid. You'll rest a couple hours, recover strength. The night is long, we have 4 more trials ahead. He extends his hand, as if for a business handshake. Congratulations on your first success. With each trial the stakes grow, Mr. Morgan. After this stunt, our clients have already tripled their initial investments. I don't respond to the handshake. The investor doesn't look offended. On the contrary, my restraint seems to amuse him. From the corner of my eye, I see Isabel. She watches me with a mixture of concern and strange pride. For her, this is still part of the performance, dangerous but controlled process where her husband unexpectedly showed hidden stunt talents. If she knew the truth. 3. The second trial began 3 hours later. My burns were treated, professionally, competently, but with minimal painkillers. Pain had to remain part of the spectacle. Now the arena transformed. In the center, a narrow ledge no more than half a meter wide, raised 5 meters above the floor. Around it, soft mats, but everyone understood their true purpose, not to protect me from falling, but to provide good viewing for spectators. The investor explained the rules like a gracious quiz host. Combat at height, Mr. Morgan. You and 4 of our fighters, 2 on each side of the ledge. The task is simple, remain on the platform. Whoever falls is eliminated. Last one standing wins. And if they win? I asked, stretching muscles damaged by burns. Then the trial isn't passed, shrugged the investor, and we proceed to the underwater scene with your charming spouse. This time Isabel wasn't on the platform. She'd been taken to another scene to prepare for some of her episodes. It was for the best. I didn't want her to see me being beaten. And that they would beat me, I had no doubt. My opponents proved to be what I expected, professional fighters, possibly with MMA or underground fighting experience. Powerful, trained bodies, cold eyes of people accustomed to causing pain. I climbed onto the ledge. 2 stood before me, 2 more behind. No rules except one: remain on the platform. Madness to fight 4 against 1 on a narrow ledge. But that was the point. Create an obviously losing situation, make spectators believe in the inevitability of my defeat, and then, I had no doubt the investor expected me to win. Otherwise, there'd be no point to this show. The fight began without warning. The nearest fighter attacked first, straight punch to the jaw, classic opening. I evaded the strike, letting him advance forward by inertia and slightly pushed when he reached the edge. He lost balance and crashed onto the mats. 1 down, 3 remain. The second attacked from behind. I felt air movement when he swung. Duck down, roll under his arms, and now I'm behind his back. Kick to the lower back, and he flies after the first. 2 down, 2 remain. The remaining fighters exchanged glances and attacked simultaneously, 1 from front, 1 from back. Classic technique, effective against most opponents. but not against someone trained for combat while surrounded. I jumped at the last moment, letting them collide with each other. Not hard, they were too experienced for that, but enough to create a second's confusion. That second sufficed. Series of strikes, elbow to solar plexus for one, knee to face for the other. The fighter on the right staggered, lost balance. I grabbed his collar and used him as counterweight to deliver a kick to the last opponent's head. He fell like he'd been cut down. The one I held tried to break free, but I'd already redirected his movement, using inertia against him. Another moment, and he flew after his comrades. The entire fight took less than a minute. I stood on the narrow ledge, breathing heavily. Burns pulsed with pain, new injuries added, split lip, bruised ribs, but I stood. Applause sounded from the boxes, restrained, almost ironic. The investor watched me with undisguised interest, like a scientist observing a particularly successful experiment. "Excellent," he said. "Clean, efficient, without unnecessary drama. Military training evident in every movement." I jumped from the ledge, landing on the mats. Pain shot through my body, but I didn't show it. "What's next?" I asked. "Oh, we're just beginning," smiled the investor. "The next trial will require not only your combat skills, but also technical mastery." The third trial proved exactly as he promised. A motorcycle, old Ducati with modified engine. Track laid through abandoned city set decorations. And mines, real anti-personnel mines placed throughout the route. "The task is extremely simple," explained the investor. "Ride from start to finish in 3 minutes. The route is marked with red flags. Deviation from the route has consequences." "And if I simply refuse?" I asked, examining the motorcycle. "We've already discussed the consequences," shrugged the investor. "But if you wish, we can invite your wife and explain the game rules to her. I'm sure she'll be impressed by your self-sacrifice." "Don't," I said quickly. "I'll ride." I mounted the motorcycle, checked the controls. The machine was in good condition. They didn't want me to crash due to mechanical failure. That wouldn't add drama to their show. The track wound between concrete blocks imitating destroyed buildings. Red flags marked the route, narrow, with sharp turns, clearly designed for maximum rider stress. The mines weren't visible, and that was the main danger. They could be anywhere, under a thin layer of soil, around a turn, in a narrow passage between blocks. I took a deep breath, started the engine, and shot from the start. The first 30 seconds passed relatively calmly, sharp turns, narrow passages, but no explosions. Then, on a curve, the earth erupted to my right. The first mine detonated from the motorcycle's vibration. The blast wave hit my ears, shrapnel rattled against helmet and jacket. I held the handlebars, made the turn, continued moving. The next mine exploded directly ahead. I barely managed to wrench the handlebars, directing the motorcycle into a narrow passage between two concrete blocks. The machine passed with inches to spare, leaving paint on the concrete. Then real madness began. Mines detonated one after another. Someone clearly controlled their explosions, creating maximum spectacle for viewers. I heard explosions from all sides, felt shrapnel piercing skin, earth trembling under the wheels. But I continued moving, navigating not only by flags but by my own intuition. I'd always sensed danger well. The final stretch was the most difficult, straight road littered with mines. No choice, only speed. I maxed the throttle, trying to outrun detonation, passed through before the blast wave caught the motorcycle. I crossed the finish in a cloud of dust and shrapnel, accompanied by a series of explosions resembling holiday fireworks. 3 minutes and 12 seconds, late. I stopped the motorcycle, removed the helmet, looked at the investor. He stood beside huge clocks showing the time 3:12. "You exceeded the time limit, Mr. Morgan," he noted. "You said 3 minutes. Didn't specify what would happen if I was late," I parried. The investor smiled. For the first time that evening, it looked almost genuine. Indeed, I didn't specify. Well, consider this a bonus. After all, you survived a minefield. That's an achievement in itself. I examined myself. Jacket torn by shrapnel, new cuts and scratches added to burns. But all limbs intact, no serious wounds. What's next? I asked already habitually. Next, water, answered the investor. And there your combat skills might not be as useful. The fourth trial proved exactly as he promised. Ice water in a deep pool. Hands tied behind back with strong plastic zip ties. Feet free but in heavy boots, weighing down the dive. The task is simple, explained the investor. Dive, find the key at the pool bottom, free your hands, surface. Pool 6 meters deep, water 3 degrees Celsius. Average survival time in such water without movement, 15-20 minutes. With physical activity, half that. I stood at the pool edge, looking at the dark water. Classic Special Forces trial, only usually done with instructors and safety backup. Begin when ready, said the investor, moving to his spot. I took several deep breaths, saturating blood with oxygen. Then one more, deepest, and jumped. Cold hit like a sledgehammer. Breath caught, body instinctively tried to curl up. I forced myself to relax, let the heavy boots pull me deeper. Water grew darker with each meter. At the pool bottom, faint glimmer. Key illuminated by small flashlight for search convenience, or for drama, so viewers could see how close I was to salvation but couldn't reach it. I reached bottom, swam to the key. Now the hardest part, take it without using hands. I flipped over, grabbed the key with my teeth, turned to bring it to my bound hands behind back. Lungs burned from oxygen deprivation. Brain began to panic, demanding breath. I ignored these signals, another part of training, ability to work under oxygen starvation. Key touched the zip ties. I felt for the lock, inserted key, turned. Click, hands free, now I could swim up. But something was wrong. I pushed off the bottom but couldn't rise higher. Something held me. Looking down, I saw the ankle zip tie had caught on a metal hook at the pool bottom. A trap. They didn't intend to make this trial simple. Lungs burned like fire. Black spots began dancing before my eyes, signs of hypoxia approaching unconsciousness. I bent down, tried to free my foot. The zip tie wouldn't yield. The key, maybe it fit this lock too. I dove back, felt for the lock on the ankle tie, inserted key. Another turn and I'm free. But oxygen was almost gone. Brain desperately demanded breath. Instinct screamed, breathe, breathe, breathe. I pushed off the bottom, shot toward surface. 3 meters, 2, 1. Surfaced, greedily gulping air. Lungs hurt as if filled with broken glass. Body shook from cold and strain. But I was alive. The investor stood by the pool, looking at a watch. 3 minutes and 47 seconds underwater, he reported. Impressive. Most professional divers can't hold their breath longer than 2 minutes, especially during active movement. I climbed from the pool, shivering from cold. Medics threw a thermal blanket over me, but I pushed them away. What's next? I forced through chattering teeth. Next, the final trial, answered the investor. But first, a brief intermission. You must recover strength. He signaled, and guards brought Isabel to me. She rushed to me, embrace warm, real, sincere. Caleb, what's happening? She whispered. They said you agreed to dangerous stunts, but you're covered in wounds. Everything's fine, I answered, trying to keep my voice calm. Just work. What work? You're a security consultant, not a stuntman. I gently cupped her face in my palms, looked into her eyes. Trust me, okay? Everything will be fine. It's a military contract, can't share details. She looked at me with disbelief but nodded. Always trusted me, even when she didn't understand my decisions. Reunion time has expired, said the investor, approaching us. Mr. Morgan, the final trial awaits you, the most important. 4. The fifth trial was to begin in an hour. They gave me dry clothes, allowed me to rest in a small room resembling a dressing room. I used this time to recover strength and think through a plan. 4 trials passed, each subsequent one harder than the previous. What would be the last? What could be harder than surviving a minefield or ice water with bound hands? And most importantly, what happens after? The investor promised to release Isabel if I passed all trials. But could I trust a man who organized a betting pool on human lives? The door opened, and the investor himself entered, impeccably dressed as always, as if he hadn't spent the last hours watching my torment. "Time, Mr. Morgan," he said. "Our guests await the final act." I stood, ignoring pain throughout my body. "What happens next, after the last trial?" "If you survive," clarified the investor, "we'll keep our word. You and your wife will be free. No pursuit, no threats. And if I decide to go to the police?" He smiled condescendingly, like an adult smiles at a naive child. "With what evidence? We're professionals, Mr. Morgan. All our clients are people with impeccable reputations and connections in the highest circles. Your story will look like paranoid delusions." He was right, and I knew it. The system protects its own. "Now come," said the investor. "Let's not keep the audience waiting." The arena had changed again. Now it was open space without additional structures. In the center stood a simple metal frame with a hooded person tied to it. "Your final trial, Mr. Morgan," announced the investor, addressing me and the spectators in the darkened boxes. "Extremely simple. You must kill this person." I froze, trying to process his words. "Is he a criminal?" I asked. "What difference does it make?" shrugged the investor. "He's necessary for our spectacle. Isn't that the main thing?" He handed me a pistol, standard Glock 19, well familiar from service. One shot to the head, clean and simple. I took the pistol, checked the magazine. 1 round as promised. "And if I refuse?" "Then everything was in vain," answered the investor simply. "Your wife will die, you too. And our guest," he nodded to the hooded person, "won't survive either. So the choice is obvious, isn't it?" I walked to the center of the arena, gripping the pistol. My brain frantically searched for a way out, another solution. I could shoot the investor, but that wouldn't save Isabel. The guards surely had orders to kill her in case of unforeseen circumstances. I approached the hooded person. He didn't move, made no sounds, unconscious, dead, drugged. I raised the pistol, aimed at the head covered in black fabric, finger on the trigger. And at that moment the lights went out. Absolute darkness, sudden and complete. I instinctively jumped aside, left the open space, assumed combat stance. Seconds stretched in darkness. Then emergency lighting came on, dim, reddish. In this ghostly light, I saw one of the spectators stand in his box and tear off his mask. Captain Daniel Reed, my former commander, the man I'd thought died a year ago in an operation in Syria. "Morgan," he said in his characteristic hoarse voice, "not bad for a warm-up." I froze, not believing my eyes. "Captain, what are you doing here?" "Same as you," he answered, "passing a trial, only mine lasted longer, much longer." The investor applauded, standing aside with a satisfied smile. "This was impressive, Captain Reed," he said. "You passed your own trial flawlessly. A whole year undercover in the role of a deceased officer. Even I began to believe you were really one of us." "All this a performance?" I asked, shifting my gaze from the investor to Reed. "All these trials, threats to Isabel?" "Oh, the threats were real," smiled the investor. "As was the danger, as were the stakes, just the scale was larger than you thought." Reed descended from his seat, approached me. "Sorry, Morgan, but this was the only way to test you, truly test." "Test for what?" I asked, still gripping the pistol. "For humanity," Reed answered simply. for the ability to preserve what makes you human, even after everything we went through in war. The investor approached closer, and now I noticed his eyes didn't look cold. There was something resembling hope. "Allow me to explain, Mr. Morgan," he said. "What you saw today is only a small part of a larger experiment. We study the boundaries of human spirit, limits of devotion and love, but not for entertainment, for understanding." He took a phone from his pocket, turned on the screen. It showed an operating room where a tied woman lay on the table. "Isabel, this is live feed," said the investor. "Your wife is currently in our clinic. She's fine, but the situation could change at any moment." My heart clenched. I aimed the pistol at the investor. "What have you done to her?" "Nothing yet," he answered calmly. "But the essence of our experiment isn't physical trials, Mr. Morgan. They're just preparation for the real test, a test of your humanity." Reed put his hand on my shoulder. "Morgan, listen to me. I've been tracking this organization for a year. They call themselves the Theater. They use former military, testing how far they're willing to go to save loved ones. But the real goal isn't death. The real goal is emotions. Fear, love, devotion, determination. They broadcast these emotions to a closed network for elite clients who pay millions for the opportunity to feel something genuine." I looked at them, trying to comprehend what was said. "Mr. Morgan," continued the investor, "you passed all physical trials flawlessly, but the real trial is ahead, and it will show who you really are." 5. The investor signaled, and full lighting came on in the hall. I saw that behind the hooded person tied to the frame stood 4 more in similar hoods. "The final trial, Mr. Morgan," said the investor, "the real test." Reed stepped aside, taking the position of observer. "You still think this is a test of devotion," continued the investor. "But actually we're testing something greater. We're testing whether you remained human after everything you experienced in war, after all the killing, all the cruelty." He turned to the 5 hooded figures. "We give you a pistol with 1 round," he said, pointing to the weapon in my hand, "and present you with a choice." At that moment the lights went out again, not completely this time, just dimmed, creating a dark, tense atmosphere. After a few seconds, emergency lighting came on, and I saw Reed step forward, removing his jacket and remaining in military uniform underneath. "Morgan," he said, and his voice now sounded not like a captain's, but like the voice of a man with whom we'd gone through hell. "This is the final trial, for both of us." I looked at him, not understanding what was happening. "A year ago I faked my death to infiltrate the theater," continued Reed. "They use former special forces in their games, testing their strength. But the true goal isn't physical trials. The true goal is moral choice." The investor stepped aside, allowing Reed to lead the conversation. "I worked undercover gathering evidence," Reed said. "But over time I realized the task was more complex than it seemed. The theater isn't just a betting pool. It's a cult, a philosophical system. They believe they're creating a new elite, people who have gone through extreme trials and preserved humanity." He came closer to me. "I planned an operation to eliminate them. Everything was ready. And then I learned they'd chosen a new target, you and Isabel." "Why us?" I asked, still holding the pistol ready. "Because I told them about you," Reed answered simply. "Described you as the ideal candidate, combat experience, psychological stability, strong attachment to your wife. They became interested." "You used us as bait," I stated, not asked. "As an opportunity to strike a decisive blow," Reed corrected. "To take them all at once. But for that I needed a reliable person inside." He looked at the 5 hooded figures. "And here we are. The final trial, Morgan, for them. A test of your humanity for us. A chance to end the theater once and for all." At that moment full lighting came on in the hall, blindingly bright after the dimness. I instinctively shielded my eyes with my hand. The final trial, repeated Reed. The choice that will determine who you really are. Six. In the bright light, I saw assistants simultaneously tear the hoods from the 5 figures, and froze, not believing my eyes. Before me stood 5 women, and all looked exactly like Isabel. Same facial features, same hair, same eyes. 5 perfect copies of my wife looked at me with identical expressions of fear and hope. "What the?" I began, but Reed interrupted me. "4 of them are professional doubles in makeup," he explained. "One is the real Isabel. You have 1 bullet, Caleb. If you shoot a fake, she dies, an innocent person dies. If you hit the real one, you save 4 lives because your wife is wearing a bulletproof vest and you've passed the test." I looked at 5 identical women, unable to believe the reality of what was happening. This is madness," I forced out. "This is the final trial," said the investor, returning to view. "A test of your ability to recognize a loved one, a test of your willingness to take responsibility for the choice." I slowly approached the first woman. She looked exactly like Isabel, same green eyes with golden flecks, same small mole under her right ear that I loved to kiss in the mornings. Even the scent was hers, jasmine and amber. "Caleb," she whispered, "please help me." Isabel's voice, Isabel's intonations, even the slight accent left from a childhood spent between Europe and America. I moved to the second. Same appearance, same look, but she was silent, just looking at me with pleading eyes. Third, fourth, fifth, all looked absolutely identical. Professionals of their craft, makeup artists, special effects specialists, had done perfect work. I slowly circled them, trying to find any clue, any difference, but there were none, or I couldn't see them. And then realization hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't confidently determine which was the real Isabel, the woman I'd lived with for 3 years, the woman I thought I knew to the last detail. Years of military missions, psychological training, constant vigilance had damaged my ability to form deep emotional connections. Isabel, any of them, had always been a function for me, not a person. I stopped, lowering the pistol. A strange emptiness spread inside, not pain, not despair, but emptiness. As if I'd finally seen the truth about myself that I'd suspected but didn't want to admit. "I won't shoot," I said, addressing Reed. "Not this time." Reed looked at me with an unreadable expression. "You're failing the test, soldier." "No," I answered, and confidence appeared in my voice that I hadn't felt a minute ago. "I'm finally passing it." I threw the pistol on the floor. Metal clanged against concrete, the sound echoing through the hushed hall. Now I no longer circled the women like a warden. I approached the first, carefully took her face in my palms, looked intently into her eyes. I wasn't looking for external signs. I was looking for what couldn't be faked: the soul. Then moved to the second, to the third. Approaching the fourth, I froze. Without a word, I embraced her and whispered, "Forgive me." I turned to Reed. "Here's my wife." I recognized her not by appearance, but by how she responds to my touch. She's the only one whose heart beats faster when I'm near. Applause sounded in the hall, restrained, almost ironic. Reed nodded. "Congratulations. That's the correct answer. The trial wasn't to shoot correctly, but to refuse to shoot at all, because there was no bulletproof vest on your wife." I held Isabel, feeling her heartbeat next to mine, but something was wrong. Her pulse changed, the rhythm became different, more precise, more professional. I looked into her eyes and noticed a strange detail. A barely noticeable cold smile appeared on her face. Not my Isabel's smile. She slowly freed her hand from my embrace, and I saw a miniature pistol appear from the folds of her clothing. The world slowed, as happens in moments of mortal danger. I saw the finger on the trigger, the pistol rising, but not toward me. Isabel fired, not at me, but at the investor, who at that moment was trying to discreetly draw a weapon. The bullet hit his shoulder, An expression of pain and surprise froze on his face. "They forced me," whispered Isabel, still holding the pistol. "6 months ago they found me at an audition and said either I agree to their game or they'll kill you." Reed gave a signal, and people in tactical gear burst into the hall, special service operatives. They surrounded the investor and his assistants, quickly and professionally putting on handcuffs. "We've been tracking this organization for 2 years," Reed explained as operatives worked around us. "Isabel contacted us when she received their offer. We prepared the operation, but needed her to reach the very center of the network. The last 3 months she's been playing a double game." I looked at my wife with incomprehension. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Couldn't risk it. They watched our every move," Isabel answered with tears. "Those photographs, they were real, but I was drugged. I don't even remember how it happened." Reed put his hand on my shoulder. "She risked her life, Morgan, for you, for justice. This was her test of loyalty, and she passed it." I looked at Isabel, my Isabel, who, as it turned out, I both knew and didn't know at the same time. The woman who turned out to be stronger and braver than I thought. The woman who went through hell for our love. "What now?" I asked. "Now," smiled Reed, "you'll start over, but this time you'll truly get to know each other." The Crucible of Devotion. Chapter 4, Revelation. 1. Special forces in black uniforms dispersed throughout the hall, taking positions at every exit. The investor sat on the floor, pressing his palm to his shot shoulder, face distorted with pain, but in his eyes, strange, almost research interest, as if he observed what was happening from the side, analyzing and cataloging reactions. A scientist to the end. Medics examined Isabel's 4 doubles, women who now, next to the real one, no longer seemed so similar. Differences emerged like a photograph in developing solution. One had a slightly different eyebrow curve, another's expression lines were positioned differently, the third had a different voice tone, the fourth different posture. And how could I not have noticed this before? Isabel stood beside me, still gripping the small pistol, as if unable to part with it even now when danger had passed. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline still pulsing in her blood. Reed gave brief orders over radio, then approached us. "Operational part complete," he said. "The investor and all key figures of the theater detained. Synchronized operations are being conducted in 3 more cities right now." "And the spectators?" I asked, nodding toward the boxes where those who'd watched my trial sat. "Also working with us," answered Reed. "Elite group of observers, psychologists, analysts, experts in nonverbal behavior. All this wealthy audience, our people." I finally looked away from the 5 identical women and looked at the captain. "So this whole theater, all these games, this was a multi-move operation to capture Montgomery." I nodded toward the investor, who was being led from the hall under guard. "Not quite," answered Reed. "The theater existed long before our operation. We just infiltrated their structure to destroy it from within." Isabel finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "They found me 6 months ago after an audition for an independent production. Said they could offer a better role in a major project." She paused. "Only later did I realize it wasn't a real dance company." I remembered the photographs I'd found in the first envelope. "And those photos, for auditions, they were part of their plan." Isabel looked away. "Yes, the theater used performing arts as cover. They really produced performances, but the real business was different, creating extreme situations and broadcasting genuine emotions for an elite audience." She paused. "When I realized what I'd gotten into, it was too late. They had compromising material." "The second envelope," I said slowly. "Those photographs were real." She nodded but didn't meet my eyes. "They drugged me and—" She didn't finish the sentence. "I don't remember what happened, but the photos were real." Reed intervened. "When it became clear, the the theater, had chosen you as new participants, Isabel contacted us. We'd been gathering information about the organization's activities for a long time, but couldn't get close enough to the core. So all this, I swept my hand around the hall, the trials, the whole situation, was real or staged. Both, answered Reed. The trials were real, the danger was real, but the context, interpretation were part of our operation. I looked at Isabel, my Isabel, who I thought I knew to the last detail, to the last breath. Turned out I didn't know her at all. Why didn't you tell me? I asked quietly. I could have helped. The theater watched our every move, she answered. The house, phones, cars. The slightest hint that I'd warned you and the plan would be ruined. And she swallowed, they threatened to kill you if I refused to cooperate or tried to escape. I remembered how easily I'd found the accidentally forgot phone and envelope with photographs. How conveniently I'd gained access to the office video surveillance system. How almost without resistance I'd penetrated to the producer's computer. I was led along this path, I said slowly. Every action of mine was predicted and used. That's how the theater works, nodded Reed. Like in chess, thinking several moves ahead, knowing how you'd react. Your combat skills, your training, your instincts, all made you predictable for their system. Looking back, I saw the whole situation anew. Every decision of mine, every step, all led to one goal. I was the main figure in their spectacle, without even suspecting it. And worst of all was that I didn't recognize my own wife among the doubles. Not immediately. Had to resort to basic instincts, physical reactions, to find her among the copies. What did that say about our relationship? About my ability to truly see another person? I looked at Isabel, and understanding was written in her eyes. She knew what I was thinking. We need to talk, I said, alone. 2. They placed us in a safe house outside the city, modest cottage with reinforced perimeter security and armored glass. Classic shelter for witnesses or special operation participants. Reed left to coordinate operations in other cities, promising to return in a day with updated information. We were left alone, for the first time in a long time truly alone, without surveillance, without hidden motives, without pretense. It was strange to realize we could finally speak freely, as if we'd both become so accustomed to masks that now we didn't know how to communicate without them. Isabel sat on the couch, hugging her knees, a defensive posture I knew well. Her eyes were red from tears, but she held on as always. You should know the whole truth, she finally said. I should have told you earlier, but you couldn't, I finished for her. I understand. No, you don't, she shook her head. It's not just about the theater, it's about us. I sat opposite, giving her space. What do you mean? Isabel took a deep breath. Caleb, you're a wonderful husband, caring, faithful, reliable, but you never fully opened up to me. There was always this wall, bulletproof glass between us. I could see you but could never really touch. Her words were like a precise shot, straight to a pain point whose existence I hadn't even suspected. Isabel, No, let me finish, she gently interrupted. When the theater contacted me, I was vulnerable. Not because of my career, as you think, because of us. I felt I was losing you, or maybe never really had you. She stood, went to the window. Beyond the glass was visible a green lawn and forest in the distance, a peaceful view contrasting with our conversation. You know what was most frightening, she continued without turning around. Not the threats, not the blackmail, not the danger, but the thought that I could lose you and you wouldn't even notice. You'd continue living in your fortress, not letting anyone inside. I was silent, digesting her words. They were painful truth. Over years of service, I'd learned to wall myself off from the world, keep emotions under control, not allow myself to attach too strongly. It was a survival strategy in combat zones, but I'd transferred it to our peaceful life, to our marriage. When I agreed to work with Reed, continued Isabel, it wasn't just for your safety. It was a chance to reach you, to show that I'm stronger than you think, that I can be a partner, not just decoration in your fortress. She finally turned to me, and in her eyes was so much pain and hope simultaneously that my breath caught. You really couldn't recognize me among those women, she said quietly. It's not your fault, you just never saw me whole. I stood and slowly approached her, not to embrace or comfort, just to be closer when I said what I had to say. You're right, I admitted. My whole adult life I learned not to attach, not to feel too strongly. It was the only way to survive where I was, to see friends die day after day and continue functioning. I paused, choosing words. When I returned and met you, I thought I could just switch, be normal. But the human brain doesn't work that way. I brought the war home, to our bedroom, to our kitchen. Not gunfire and explosions, but walls, invisible barricades. Isabel looked at me, and for the first time in a long time I allowed myself to truly see her. Not just observe or analyze, but see the person before me. I won't shoot, I said, repeating words spoken in the arena. Not this time, and not the next. I refuse to continue living under siege, Isabel. I want to learn to feel again. She took a step toward me, not for an embrace, just to be closer. It won't be easy, she said, for either of us. I know, I nodded, but I'm ready to try, really try. She extended her hand, and I took it. A simple gesture, but the beginning of something new. Not a promise of immediate solution to all problems, but rather a vow to work on them together. And at that moment I threw down my weapon for the second time. Not a physical pistol, but the one I'd always carried inside. Constant vigilance, distrust, emotional detachment. This was a moment of real choice. Real test of loyalty, not just to each other but to ourselves. 3. Reed returned the next day as promised. He looked tired but satisfied. The operation had clearly been successful. We got everyone, he reported, accepting a cup of coffee from Isabel. The investor, his inner circle, financiers, technical specialists. The entire structure of the theater is destroyed. What will happen to them? I asked. Standard procedure for organizations of this scale, shrugged Reed. Some will go to trial. Some will agree to deals in exchange for information. Some will simply disappear from public view. He sipped his coffee, looked at both of us. And what will happen to you? Good question. Isabel and I exchanged glances. We haven't decided yet, she answered. Witness protection program, I suggested, though the thought itself was unpleasant. Reed shook his head. I don't think that's necessary. We took all the key players. Those who remain free won't risk pursuing you, too dangerous to attract attention after such a failure. So we just return to normal life, Isabel asked doubtfully. The definition of normal life is quite subjective, Reed noted with a slight smile. But yes, I think you can go home. Maybe you should change cities, jobs. Start with a clean slate. Start with a clean slate. The thought seemed both frightening and attractive. And you, I asked Reed, returning to service. He thought for a moment. No, after a year living undercover I'm tired. Time to pass the torch to the young. So, retiring. I couldn't imagine Reed in a rocking chair with a fishing rod. Let's call it consulting work, he smiled, without field operations. Reed finished his coffee and set the cup on the table. But before we all go our separate ways to our new lives, I need to show you something. He took a tablet from his briefcase, turned it on, and handed it to me. On the screen was a file marked Top Secret with a strange title, Orpheus Protocol. I opened the document and began reading, feeling Isabel looking over my shoulder. With each line, my bewilderment grew. What is this, Reed? I asked, having read the first page. The real story of the theater, he answered, and the reason we couldn't stop them for so long. According to the document, the theater wasn't an ordinary criminal organization. It was the offspring of a secret government project begun in the 1970s, research into extreme states of human psychology, loyalty under extreme conditions, ability to make moral decisions under pressure. The project went out of control, continued Reed. As often happens with secret experiments, the leadership saw potential for personal enrichment and transformed scientific research into exclusive entertainment for the elite. The government knew about this, asked Isabel. Some elements knew, nodded Reed. Others didn't. Classic situation where the right hand doesn't know what the left is doing. I scrolled through the document, and the picture became clearer and simultaneously more frightening. So the investor, Gerald Montgomery, former military psychiatrist who worked on the project from the beginning, confirmed Reed. Brilliant mind, absolutely amoral person, perfect combination for creating such a system. And all these women, Isabel swallowed, dancers who died. Not all of them actually died, answered Reed. Some now live under new names with new faces, part of the spectacle. I closed the document, feeling a strange mixture of anger and relief. Why are you showing us this? Because you deserve to know the truth, Reed answered simply. And because I need you to understand, this story won't end with a beautiful trial and just verdict. Too many influential people are involved. Too many skeletons in closets. They'll escape responsibility. Indignation sounded in Isabel's voice. Not quite, Reed smiled slightly. Let's say they'll never play their games again, but as for you two, he looked at us, you need to decide what to do next. He stood, indicating the conversation was over. You have a week in this house, then you'll need to leave. We're up to you. He headed for the door but stopped at the threshold. And one more thing. No one except the three of us knows Isabel worked undercover. For everyone else, even my colleagues, you were ordinary victims of the theater. Better if it stays that way. When the door closed behind him, Isabel and I sat in silence for a long time, trying to comprehend everything we'd learned. What will we do? She finally asked. I took her hand, no longer just a gesture but real contact. What we should have done long ago, start over. 4. The week in the safe house flew by quickly. Isabel and I talked a lot, more than in all 3 years of marriage. We told each other stories that previously seemed insignificant or too painful. We filled gaps, built bridges across chasms of misunderstanding. Isabel told about her childhood in a diplomatic family, about constant moves, about feeling homeless, about how dancing became a way to adapt to new places and people. I told about the war, not a chronicle of combat operations, but what was truly important, about fear, about friendship on the front lines, about moments of humanity amid chaos. We both cried, we both laughed, we both remained silent when words weren't needed. And gradually, day by day, something changed between us. Not a dramatic transformation from movies, but a quiet, deep shift. Like tectonic plates moving invisibly but inexorably, creating new landscape. On the 7th day, Reed returned with final news and a package of documents. New passports, driver's licenses, credit cards, he said, handing over the envelope. All real, legal, just with new names. Consider it the government's gratitude for services. And what about our house things? Asked Isabel. A team has already packed everything necessary, answered Reed. The rest will be sold, money transferred to your new account. I took the documents, looked through them. Michael and Elizabeth Ryan, Oregon residents. He, security consultant, she, contemporary dance teacher at the local college. Why Oregon? I asked. Quiet place, far from both coasts, low crime, good medicine, shrugged Reed. And they always need good teachers there. Isabel took her new passport, ran her finger over the photograph. Elizabeth, she said, as if tasting the name, I like it. Is this forever? I asked. Or will we someday be able to return to our former names? Up to you, answered Reed. Legally, nothing prevents you from keeping your old identities, but I'd recommend starting with a clean slate. He looked at both of us with an expression I rarely saw on his face, almost paternal care. You've earned a new life, Morgan, both of you. He extended his hand and I shook it, firmly, manly, without unnecessary words. Then he hugged Isabel, which wasn't his style at all. Take care of him, he told her. He's the best of those I served with. I know, she answered simply. Reed nodded, as if completing an important mission, and headed for the door. Captain, I called after him, thank you. He turned, and a rare smile flickered across his face. It was an honor, Sergeant. When the door closed behind him, I felt strange relief, as if an important stage of life had ended, and now we could move forward. Isabel approached me, laid her head on my shoulder. Ready for a new life, Michael Ryan. I embraced her, for the first time not thinking about possible threats, escape routes, and tactical positions. Just held close the person I loved. Ready, Elizabeth Ryan. 5. The first 6 months in Oregon were simultaneously the most difficult and most peaceful in my life. We bought a small house on the outskirts of a university town, spacious, with wide windows and a garden. A place open to the world, not a fortress designed to protect from it. Isabel, now Elizabeth, got a position at the local arts college. She taught contemporary dance to students who looked at her with admiration, not suspecting what she'd been through. I opened a small security consulting firm. Not a security agency like before, but specifically consulting practice. Helped local businesses protect data, assessed physical security of buildings, conducted training for personnel. Peaceful work using my skills but not related to violence. We both saw a therapist, individually and as a couple. Not because we had serious problems, but because we wanted to avoid them. We wanted to learn to talk to each other before misunderstanding turned into a chasm. Sometimes at night I was still haunted by nightmares, not only about war, but about the trials of the theater, about 5 Isabels, about my inability to recognize my own wife. At such moments she simply held my hand, not trying to comfort with words, just letting me know she was there. She had her own demons too. Sometimes she woke screaming, certain they had found us, that everything would repeat. On such nights I became the anchor, embraced, didn't let go, reminded her we were safe. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Isabel suddenly turned to me. I'm pregnant, she said simply. I froze, trying to comprehend these 2 words that changed everything. When did you find out? 3 days ago, she answered. I wanted to be sure before telling you. I looked at her, my wife, with whom we'd gone through hell, my wife whom I was learning to know anew every day, and felt something warm spreading in my chest. Not panic, not fear for the future, but happiness. Are you happy? She asked with slight uncertainty. I took her hand, kissed her fingers. More than I can express in words. She smiled, and in that smile was everything: relief, joy, hope. Me too, she confessed, and scared at the same time. Of what? That I won't cope, that this world is too harsh for a child, that someday they will return. I understood her fears. They lived in me too, but over the past months I'd learned not to let fears control my decisions. Elizabeth, I said, using her new name as a reminder of our new life, we can't promise everything will be perfect. No one can, but we can promise we'll be there, with the child and with each other. She laid her head on my shoulder, and we watched the last rays of sun paint the horizon gold. A symbolic moment, the end of one day and the promise of the next. That night I slept without nightmares for the first time in a long time. 6. A year later, on an almost identical summer evening, we again sat on that same porch. Only now between us was a cradle, and in it, our 3-month-old daughter Olivia. A small miracle with Isabel's eyes and my stubborn chin, as my wife joked. Life had found a new rhythm, calm, measured, centered around a tiny being who completely depended on us. Sleepless nights, first smiles, endless fascination with every new gesture or sound. I never thought I was capable of such unconditional love. Never imagined I'd wake in the middle of the night not from nightmares about the past, but from the desire to simply watch my child breathe. Isabel, I still sometimes called her that in my thoughts, though aloud she'd been Elizabeth for over a year, held our daughter in her arms, quietly humming a lullaby. She'd blossomed in motherhood, as if she'd found the role she was created for. "A letter from Reed came today," she said, not taking her eyes off the baby. I nodded. Our former commander wrote rarely but regularly, usually short notes about weather, fishing, mundane things. Never anything about work, about the past, about the theater. We understood and appreciated this caution. "What does he write?" "Retired for real," smiled Isabel. "Bought a place by the lake. Invites us to visit when Olivia's a bit older." "Old fox," I shook my head. "Probably still consulting special services from his lake house." "Probably," she agreed. We fell silent, enjoying the moment of quiet. Then Isabel looked at me with that special gaze that appeared after our daughter's birth, a look full of serene happiness. "I was so afraid I'd lost you," she said quietly. "I thought I'd lost myself too," I answered. "But now I know for certain this is my heart and it will always beat faster near you." She smiled, and I saw the sunset's reflection in her eyes, golden glints, like the promise of many more such evenings to come. We sat on the porch of our house, a former Special Forces operator, a dancer who played the most important role of her life, and a little girl who knew nothing about the theater, trials, and secret organizations. I looked at the bump of scar on my palm, a trace from the burn during the first trial, a physical reminder of the past that, strangely, didn't evoke painful memories. Just a scar, part of the story that led us here. Olivia woke up, opened her eyes, surprisingly aware gaze for such a tiny being. Isabel handed me our daughter, and I took this precious burden with the care I'd learned over recent months. Little fingers wrapped around my index finger with surprising strength. Unconditional trust, unconditional love. I looked at the horizon where the sun painted the sky in copper and golden tones. Day was ending and night beginning, not frightening, not threatening, but simply another part of the day, part of life. We'd passed our test of loyalty, not just to each other, but to ourselves. And in this quiet, ordinary moment was a reward more significant than any medal received in service. I held my future in my arms and knew, whatever happened next, we'd handle it. Together. If you enjoyed this story, please support the author with a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your emotions in the comments. Thank you.